The blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived, bigger than any dinosaur that ever walked. Its heart alone weighs around 400 pounds, and its body can reach 150 tons. And one day, like everything else, it dies. Maybe it is old. Maybe it is sick. Maybe a ship it never heard struck it in a moment. However it happens, the great body goes still near the surface, and slowly it begins to sink. It falls through the bright water where it spent its whole life, past the last of the sunlight, past the last of the warmth, past the last animals with eyes that still work, down through a mile of cold and black, until it settles onto a place that has never seen a single ray of light. It comes to rest on the bottom of the world, in total darkness. And here, where you would expect the story to be over, it is only getting started. Because the death of a whale is the beginning of one of the strangest things in the entire ocean. A single body can feed an entire world for 50 years. It will call up creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth. It will grow a garden on poison. And almost everything we know about it, we have learned only in the last 40 years. This is what happens after the largest heart on the planet stops beating. To understand why one dead whale matters so much, you first have to understand the place it lands in. The deep sea floor is the largest living space on Earth, and it is very close to a desert. Down there, in the cold and the dark, almost nothing grows because nothing can. There is no sunlight, so there are no plants and no pasture. Every creature on the deep seabed is waiting for food to fall from far above. What falls is called marine snow. It is a slow, constant drift of tiny particles, dead plankton, scraps, dust. The crumbs of the sunlit world sinking down into the black. It is the only food most of the deep ever gets, and there is almost none of it. An animal down there might go months between meals. Many of them are built to barely move at all because moving burns energy, and energy is the one thing the deep cannot spare. To a passing camera, whole stretches of the abyss look like nothing but an empty plain of gray mud reaching out past the edge of the light. And here is the thing. Most creatures that die in the ocean never reach the bottom in one piece. They are eaten on the way down, or they rot near the surface, or they wash up on some far shore. But a whale is so enormous that even the open ocean cannot finish it before it sinks. It arrives almost whole. So picture it. Out of that starving dark, a body the size of a school bus comes down out of nowhere and lands in the mud. For the animals of the deep, a whale fall is not a meal. It is a miracle. Scientists have worked out that a single large whale delivers as much food in one night as 2,000 years of marine snow would bring to that same patch of seabed. 2,000 years of food, in one body, in the dark. The only problem, if you live down there, is finding it before everyone else does. They find it fast. The deep ocean is mostly empty, but it is not unwatched. The animals that live there have an extraordinary sense of smell, because for them, smell is how you find the rare meal before you starve to death. When a whale hits the bottom, the scent bleeds out through the water like a slow alarm, and from miles in every direction, things begin to move toward it. The first to arrive are often the sleeper sharks. Slow, blunt, heavy animals, some of them more than 10 feet long, that spend their whole lives cruising the freezing dark on almost no food. They tear into the carcass and take the biggest share, ripping away mouthfuls of blubber and muscle. Behind them come the hagfish. Hundreds of them, sometimes thousands, drawn in from a kilometer of empty seabed. A hagfish is an eel-shaped animal older than the dinosaurs, and it feeds by burrowing straight into the body and eating it from the inside out. To tear off a piece, it ties its own body into a knot and pulls. They are so perfectly built for this that they can soak up nutrients straight through their skin, even while buried alive inside the carcass. They pour into the whale until the whole thing seems to crawl. Between all of them, the scavengers can strip away 60 kilograms of whale every single day. Rat-tail fish, crabs, and swarms of pale shrimp-like creatures crowd in to take whatever they can reach. For a while, this dead thing becomes the busiest place for miles. a writhing knot of feeding in water that is otherwise empty and still. It can take a few months, it can take a few years if the whale is large enough. But eventually the scavengers finish and the great feast ends. 90% of the body gone. Every scrap of soft tissue stripped clean away. What is left is a bare skeleton lying in the dark. And for a long time, scientists assumed that was the end of the story. They were not even close. In 1987, a small research submarine called Alvin was working in a basin off the coast of Southern California. It was the last dive of the trip. The team was crossing a stretch of barren seabed more than half a mile down, expecting to find almost nothing, when the sonar picked up something large lying on the bottom. They steered toward it, and out of the dark came a wall of bone, a whale skeleton, around 20 meters long, half sunk into the sediment. It had clearly been dead for years, but it was not quiet. As the lights swept across it, the scientists realized the bones were covered in life: clams, snails, limpets, pale worms. Sheets of white bacterial mat, glowing in the submarine's lamps. This should not have been possible. The whale had been picked clean. There was no flesh left on it to eat. And yet, something was feeding a whole crowded community on a bare skeleton in the cold and the dark, with no obvious food in sight. The biologist leading the expedition was a young researcher named Craig Smith, and what stopped him was that he had seen creatures like these before, in only one place. At hydrothermal vents, the volcanic cracks in the seafloor where life survives with no sunlight at all, fed by chemicals instead of the sun. Somehow, that same impossible sunless kind of life was growing here, on the bones of a dead whale, hundreds of miles from the nearest vent. Until that day, the textbooks treated the deep seabed as a barren waste where life only ever scraped by. A dead whale of all things was about to rewrite them. The question was how it worked, and the answer was hidden inside the bones themselves. 15 years later, another team went looking for that answer and found a monster instead. In 2002, scientists at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute were exploring a deep canyon off California with a remote-controlled robot. They were looking for clams on the skeleton of a dead gray whale almost 2 miles down. What they saw on the bones was something nobody had ever recorded. The skeleton was covered in a red, feathery fuzz, swaying gently in the current. Up close, the fuzz turned out to be worms, thousands of them. And they had no eyes, no mouth, and no stomach at all. Instead of a mouth, each worm grew a tangle of green roots that drilled down into the solid whale bone and dissolved it from within, feeding on the fat and protein locked inside the skeleton. The scientists named them Osedax. It is Latin for bone devourer. And the worms only got stranger the closer anyone looked. Every single one of the red waving worms on that bone was female. The males turned out to be microscopic dwarfs, so small that they spend their entire lives inside the body of a female. Dozens or even hundreds of them packed into one female's tube, doing nothing for the rest of their lives but fertilizing her eggs. Then the team read the worm's DNA and got one last surprise. Osedax were close relatives of the giant tube worms from hydrothermal vents. The same branch of life, the kind that needs no sun, had quietly found a second home on the bones of the dead. Later, when researchers lowered cow bones and fish skeletons to the sea floor just to see, the worms colonized those too. Dozens of species of them have since been found in oceans all over the world, every one of them drifting as larvae through the dark, waiting for a bone to fall. The secret was the oil. A whale skeleton is nothing like ours. Whale bones are soaked in fat, packed with the oil that helped the living animal stay warm and stay afloat. In a big whale, the skeleton can hold 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of it. Tons of oil sealed inside bone, sitting on the floor of the sea. And down in the deep, that oil is a fortune that takes decades to spend. Inside the bones, bacteria go to work on the fat. As they break it down, they give off a gas, hydrogen sulfide, the same chemical that gives rotten eggs their smell, and which is poisonous to almost everything alive. Almost. because there is a whole branch of life that breathes that poison the way we breathe air. They are called chemosynthetic bacteria, and they feed on that gas directly, turning the whale's own poison into food. On a whale fall, these bacteria spread across the bones in mats of white and yellow, and on top of them grows everything else. The clams and mussels and worms that either graze on the bacteria or carry them alive inside their own flesh. A skeleton becomes a reef. The reef becomes a city, a whole crowded settlement, living off the slow leak of poison from a dead animal's bones, with no sunlight reaching it at all. Scientists now count this as a third kind of life that runs without the sun. The hydrothermal vents were the first. The cold seeps where chemicals ooze up through the seabed were the second. And the third, it turned out, was death itself, arriving from above. This is the longest stage of a whale fall, and it lasts an astonishing length of time. Researchers have watched single skeletons stay alive like this for more than 20 years. For the largest whales, the estimates run to 50 years, maybe longer. Half a century of life growing out of one death. And the life it grows is genuinely strange. A single whale skeleton can hold around 180 different species at the same time. More than 20 of them have never been found anywhere else on the planet. They live on whale bones, and as far as we can tell, only on whale bones, which means that for these creatures, a dead whale is not simply useful, it is the only world they have ever had. Which leaves one strange and beautiful question. If some animals can live only on whale falls, how on earth do they get from one dead whale to the next? Whales do not die on a schedule. A single skeleton might hold a crowd of life for 50 years, and then there is nothing for miles for decades more. And yet, these specialists keep turning up again and again on carcass after carcass across whole oceans. The leading idea is that whale falls work like stepping stones. Each dead whale is an island of life on an empty plain, and the drifting larvae of these creatures ride the currents until they stumble onto the next one, hopping across the floor of the sea from one body to another, generation after generation. Some scientists suspect these islands may even link the hydrothermal vents to the cold seeps, letting sunless life spread clear across the deep ocean, with dead whales serving as the bridges. It is still an argument, not a settled fact, but the carcasses keep proving it could be true. And we are still finding out how vast this hidden world really is. In June of 2026, scientists exploring the Indian Ocean announced the largest graveyard of whales ever discovered, a stretch of deep seabed they called a whale necropolis. Across nearly 700 miles, they counted hundreds of separate whale fall sites, some of them more than 4 miles down, and they estimated the area may hold the remains of more than 10 million whales. The bones reached back over 5 million years, an entire buried history of falling giants from long before there were any people to wonder about it. There is one last thing the whale leaves behind. All the carbon it gathered across a long life, locked up in that enormous body, goes down with it and stays on the seafloor, out of the air, for centuries at a time. The whale spends its life as the largest creature in the sea. In its death, it quietly becomes something else. One of the deep ocean's slow, patient ways of pulling carbon out of the sky and holding the whole planet a little steadier. So the next time you hear that a whale has died, try to picture it differently, not as an ending. The body sinking past the last of the light will feed more life, over more years than that whale ever met while it was alive. It will build a world and grow a garden and keep its secrets long after the last of us has forgotten it was ever there. The ocean wastes nothing. It only takes its time. If you made it all the way to the bottom with us, subscribe to Blues Below and we will keep going down. Because the ocean keeps its secrets. But every now and then, if you are patient, it lets you watch one unfold.